The shotgun blast echoed like thunder across the empty pasture, splintering the fence post inches from my boot, and I froze, heart slamming against my ribs as the acrid smoke curled up from the barrel in Harlan's gnarled hands. "You think you can waltz in here, city boy, and play house with one of my boys?" he snarled, his voice a venomous drawl that cut deeper than any bullet could. In that split second, with the ranch hands scattering like spooked colts and the Wyoming wind whipping dust into my eyes, I realized the fragile world Andrew and I had built was about to shatter like cheap glass under a boot heel. I'd come to the Double Bar Ranch 6 months earlier, chasing ghosts and a paycheck, fresh off a brutal breakup in Chicago that left me hollowed out and questioning every damn choice I'd ever made. At 28, I was Joshua Harlan. No relation to the old bastard who just tried to ventilate me. Thank God. And I traded skyscrapers for sagebrush because the classified ad promised hard work, fresh air, and no bullshit. Lies, all of it. The work was brutal. Dawn patrols mending barbed wire that sliced your palms raw, endless rides herding cattle through blizzards that turned your fingers to ice picks, and nights so quiet you could hear your own regrets whispering in the dark. But the no bullshit part? That evaporated the day I met Andrew. He was the foreman, 32 and carved from the same rugged granite as the Rockies themselves. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-bleached hair peeking from under his Stetson and eyes the color of storm clouds over the Platte River. Andrew didn't say much at first, just nodded when the ranch owner, Old Man Whitaker, introduced me as the new hand from the east. "Show him the ropes, Drew," Whitaker grunted, clapping me on the back hard enough to rattle my teeth. Andrew's grip was firm when he shook my hand, calluses like sandpaper against my softer city skin, and there was something in his steady gaze that made my stomach twist. Not fear, exactly, but a spark of recognition, like he'd seen his own hidden fractures in mine. We started slow, the way you ease a Greenbroke Mustang into the saddle. Mornings, he'd ride out with me to check the fences, his voice low and gravelly as he pointed out the tells. "A sagging post here, a coyote-chewed line there. Ranchin' ain't about muscle, Josh," he'd say, reining in his gelding to roll a smoke, the flame from his lighter flickering across his jaw. "It's about knowin' when to push and when to let go." I'd nod, pretending to focus on the task, but my eyes kept drifting to the way his shirt clung to his back in the heat, or how his laugh, rare as rain in July, rumbled like distant thunder. I hadn't planned on feeling anything. Back in Chicago, I'd buried my queerness deep after one too many bar fights and sideways glances from friends who turned out to be anything but. Here, in this sea of straight-laced cowboys, I figured I'd keep it locked down tighter than a bank vault. But Andrew had a way of unraveling you without even trying. One evening, after a long day branding calves, the stench of singed hair still clinging to our clothes, we sat on the bunkhouse porch, passing a flask of Whitaker's Rotgut whiskey. The sun dipped low, painting the hills in fire, and he started talking. Not surface stuff, but real. How his daddy had beaten the ranch life into him until it broke him. How he'd lost his ma to cancer when he was 15 and learned to stitch his own wounds because vulnerability was a luxury wranglers couldn't afford. "Folks round here," he said, staring out at the darkening horizon, "they see what they want to see. A good foreman, a hard worker. But inside," he trailed off, taking a swig that made his throat bob. I felt it then, that pull like gravity shifting under my feet. "Inside, we're all just trying not to crack," I murmured, and when our shoulders brushed, neither of us pulled away. It built from there, quiet and fierce, like a prairie fire smoldering under the grass. Stolen glances across the branding fire, his hand lingering on my lower back when we passed tools in the barn. Whispers in the shadowed corners of the hayloft, where the world felt a million miles away. Our first real kiss happened under a canopy of stars one night after a cattle drive, when the exhaustion hit like a hammer and we collapsed against a cottonwood tree. His lips were chapped and tasting of dust and coffee, but they moved with a tenderness that stole my breath. "Josh," he breathed against my neck, "this scares the hell out of me." "Me too," I wanted to say, but instead I pulled him closer, our hearts pounding in sync like war drums. For the first time in years I felt seen, not as the gay kid from the city, but as Joshua, whole and aching and alive. The ranch became our fragile kingdom. We'd steal hours at dawn, riding out to the north pasture where the wildflowers bloomed defiant against the scrub. Andrew would talk dreams, buying his own spread someday, maybe near Jackson Hole, where the Tetons stood guard like ancient sentinels. I'd share bits of Chicago. The jazz clubs pulsing with life. The anonymity of crowds that let you breathe easy in your skin. Sounds like freedom, he'd say, lacing his fingers through mine as we lay back in the grass. The sky a vast blue vault above us. But freedom was a lie we both knew. The other hands, roughnecks like Tommy and Zeke, joked crude about Chicago pansies when they thought I couldn't hear, and Harlan, Whitaker's brother and the unofficial enforcer, watched me with eyes like a hawk spotting weakness. Andrew warned me once, over coffee in the mess hall. Harlan's old school, Bible-thumpin', narrow-minded. He suspects anything, it'll go south fast. I brushed it off, drunk on the high of us. But deep down, the fear gnawed like a rat in the walls. The betrayal came swift and sharp, courtesy of Zeke, the lanky kid with a chip on his shoulder and a mouth that ran faster than a spooked Mustang. I trusted him, stupidly, confiding over beers one night when Andrew was off mending a truck, spilling just enough about my past to feel less alone. Love's love, right? I'd slurred, the whiskey loosening my tongue. Zeke nodded, all sympathy, but the next morning, I caught him whispering to Tommy by the corrals, his voice carrying on the wind. That Foreman's got a soft spot for the queer from the city. Harlan's gonna love this. My blood turned to ice. I confronted him later, grabbing his collar in the tack room. You son of a bitch, I hissed. He just smirked, shoving me off. Ranch ain't no fairy tale, Josh. Survival's for the fittest. Word spread like wildfire through dry grass. By noon, the air crackled with tension. Hands avoiding my eyes, Whitaker pulling Andrew aside for a talk that left the foreman's jaw clenched like a vice. That night, as thunder rumbled in from the west, Harlan cornered me in the barn, his breath sour with chew and rage. I knew you were trouble the minute you stepped off that bus, he growled, shoving me against a stall door. Corruptin' my kin's operation with your filth. Andrew burst in then, drawn by the commotion, his face a mask of fury. Back off, uncle, he barked, planting himself between us. Harlan's eyes bulged. You? Defendin' this abomination? After all I done for this family. The old man lunged, but Andrew held firm, his voice steady as rain steel. Family? You ain't family. You're poison. It escalated fast, fists flying, hay bales toppling like dominoes, the crack of bone on bone echoing in the dim light. I jumped in, pulling Harlan off Andrew, taking a wild haymaker to the ribs that knocked the wind from me. We tumbled out into the yard, a snarling heap under the first fat raindrops, lightning forking the sky like God's own wrath. The other hands gathered, a circle of shadows, but none moved to help. Zeke just watched, arms crossed, his betrayal etched in the smug twist of his lips. Harlan broke free, scrambling for his shotgun propped by the door, a relic from his hunting days, loaded with birdshot but deadly enough up close. End this now, he panted, leveling it at my chest. Time stretched thin, the rain turning the dirt to mud that sucked at our boots. Andrew stepped forward, rain plastering his shirt to his skin, and for a heartbeat, I thought he'd charge. Instead, he dropped to one knee in the muck, right there in front of God and every cowboy on the double bar. Uncle, he said, voice cutting through the storm like a knife. If you pull that trigger, you kill more than him. You kill me. Harlan faltered, the barrel dipping. Andrew's eyes, fierce and unyielding, locked on his uncle's. I've hidden who I am for 32 years. Your rules, your hate. But Josh, he showed me it's okay to stand tall. To love without apology. You taught me fear. He taught me courage. The words hung heavy, raw as an open wound, and I saw it then. The gesture that would haunt and heal me forever. Andrew, the unbreakable foreman, on his knees not in defeat, but in defiant truth, offering his vulnerability like a shield for mine. Harlan's face crumpled, the gun sagging as sobs racked his frame. Not rage, but something broken open. A lifetime of buried shame spilling out in the downpour. What vi I done? He whispered, the weapon clattering to the ground. The hands dispersed in stunned silence, Zeke slinking off into the shadows like the coward he was. Whitaker fired him at dawn, but that was small comfort. Andrew and I patched up in the bunkhouse, bruises blooming like storm clouds on our skin, but the real wounds were deeper. "You didn't have to do that," I said, dabbing antiseptic on his split lip, my voice thick. He caught my hand, pulling me close, the rain still drumming on the tin roof like a heartbeat. "Yeah, I did. For us. For respect. Not just from them, but from ourselves." We held each other through the night, the world outside washing clean in the deluge, and for the first time I believed in second chances. In the weeks that followed, the ranch shifted like sand after a gale. Harlan quit cold, packing his truck and heading east to some cousin's place in Nebraska, leaving behind a note that simply read, "Forgive an old fool." Whitaker, gruff as ever, pulled us aside one morning by the windmill. "Heard the truth last night. Don't give a damn who you love, long as the work gets done." It wasn't acceptance, not fully, just the pragmatic nod of a man who'd seen too many sunsets to waste breath on judgment. Andrew and I kept riding, side by side, the north pasture our sanctuary where wildflowers nodded in the breeze. We talked of that spread near Jackson Hole, of building something real from the ruins. Looking back, that shotgun night wasn't the end. It was the forge. Andrew's gesture, kneeling in the mud to claim his truth, taught me courage isn't roaring loudest. It's the quiet stand when the world's baying for blood. Respect, that's earned in the spaces between words, in the hand extended through the storm. Out here, under these endless skies, love isn't a fairy tale. It's a hard-won brand on your soul, searing deep but marking you free. And damn if it doesn't make the sunrises worth every scar.